Bad boy.
2022 had the potential to be the biggest year for new video games since 2017. Unfortunately, a number of big delays took some of the wind out of this year's sails. Yet even with those setbacks, there were still a ton of games released in 2022 that IGN awarded a review score of 9 or higher. As we move into 2023, we look back at this year's standout releases, from the instant classic Elden Ring in February to the stellar God of War Ragnarok in November.
I'd say the moment calls for calm.
These are IGN's best reviewed games of 2022.
You want some too? Fine. It's bacon time!
Platinum Games has long been looked at as a leader in the character action genre, and Bayonetta 3 is a prime example of why. It's fast, reflex-intensive, and features challenging combat that allows for a ton of creativity and expression when it comes to the ways in which you're able to dispatch your enemies. Both its story and its performance on the Switch are less than ideal, but neither are issues that are substantial enough to get in the way of its top-tier combat, out-of-this-world weapon variety, and inimitable style. This is a far more ambitious sequel than its more iterative predecessor, and that ambition more than pays off. The new Demon Slave summoning system and several other changes to how weapons work help reinvigorate what remains one of the best combat systems throughout all of video games.
As Dusk Falls is a masterwork of branching storytelling that makes the best out of its comic book style animations, which end up giving you the opportunity to fill the negative space with your own imagination. And this works surprisingly well during some of the more intense scenes. It's an impressive solo experience, but its 8-player mode makes it a potential hit at family or friend gatherings where gamers and non-gamers mix. Its many possible choices, mixed with the emotional intensity of its expressive voice cast, make it a great recommendation for fans of crime dramas like Breaking Bad and Fargo. Virtually no one is safe from the consequences of your actions, but even if you make a choice that results in an unwanted consequence, or you mess up one of the many simplistic QuickTime events, the story can still manage to spiral out in several interesting directions that you won't expect, even on subsequent playthroughs. That makes it a joy to approach again and again until you uncover each character's secrets and mentally reconstruct the story's bigger picture.
Whether I'm creating new melting pot cultures, decorating my throne room, or throwing lavish parties to make sure everyone remembers how important I am, Royal Court goes beyond tacking on some new mechanics to the already excellent Crusader Kings 3. It weaves iron into the very fibers of the base game and makes it feel more complete and cohesive. And rather than focus on one region, all the pillars and ethoses added by the new culture system make it feel like a flavor pack for the entire world. It's the best kind of grand strategy expansion, and while it leaves dukes and tribal rulers feeling a bit left out in the rain as they can't access most of these new systems, I wouldn't want to ever play without it.
Cuphead, The Delicious Last Course, is the perfect send-off for a game that embodies the phrase one of a kind. Experienced players will likely muscle their way through the 6 bosses and optional King of Games mini-bosses in just a handful of hours, but the quality of those hours far outweighs their quantity. All of the bosses, including the King of Games mini-bosses, are among the best in the whole game. And that's saying a lot when you consider how high the bar was already set. I'm not normally one for dessert, but if you dine on Cuphead, you don't want to miss The Delicious Last Course.
If I had to pick one game to play for the rest of my life, it would be Dwarf Fortress, because I don't think I'd ever run out of new and fascinating things to do. Infinitely explorable in its complexity and equally rewarding in the depth you'll find there, this is the quintessential world simulation and building management game. Until now, its magnificent worlds have been inaccessible to all but the dedicated few, but this new Steam version is beefed up with lovely graphics and equipped with modern controls, opening the floodgates for a new generation to blissfully drown in its magnificent story engine. What spills forth is a genre-defining masterpiece, proving just how incredible video games can be when a developer has a precise goal and valiantly strives to achieve it. even if the effort takes decades.
It is no exaggeration to say that Elden Ring is FromSoftware's largest and most ambitious game yet, and that ambition has more than paid off. Even after 87 hours of blood, sweat, and tears that included some of the most challenging fights I've ever fought, and innumerable surprises, there are still bosses that I left on the table, secrets that I've yet to uncover, side quests that I missed out on, tons of weapons, spells, and skills I've never used. And this is all on top of PvP and cooperative play that I've barely been able to scratch the surface of. Throughout it all, while the fundamentals of combat haven't changed much from what we've seen before, the enormous variety of viciously designed enemies and the brutal but surmountable bosses have brought its battles to a new level. Even with all the threads I didn't manage to tug on my first playthrough, of which I'm sure there will be several, what I was treated to can easily be held among the best open world games I've ever played. Like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild before it, Elden Ring is one that we'll be looking back to as a game that moved the genre forward.
An enthralling spectacle to behold, and an even more exciting one to take the reins of, God of War Ragnarok melds action and adventure together to create a new, unforgettable Norse saga. Impeccable writing, pitch-perfect performances, knockout action, it's a complete work of art from top to bottom. Reflecting its core themes, it's everything a sequel should be, respectful of its legendary lineage, but not afraid to take it to exciting new places. God of War Ragnarok is an almighty achievement, and creates a new high that makes many of its peers look positively mortal by comparison.
On the eve of the series' 25th birthday, Gran Turismo 7 is more than just a celebration of cars this time around. In some ways, it's also a celebration of itself. A modern mix of the original Gran Turismo's trend-setting format with GT Sport's stern but very successful focus on competitive online racing. This version is a potent podium performance from developer Polyphony Digital. With gorgeous graphics, a fantastic driving feel, and racing options galore, it's the best the series has been since its dominant PlayStation 2 era. It does have some significant failings though, including how it continues to cripple its career mode races with dreadfully flawed rolling starts, its car list is no longer as comprehensive as the competition, and its always online single player mode still seems needlessly punitive. But all of that is on the periphery of GT7's outstanding driving experiences, which are enhanced by the PS5's fantastic graphics and intense and flavorful haptic feedback via the DualSense controller.
Grounded is a zany, challenging, and memorable adventure that benefits from Obsidian's instantly recognizable style, humor, and RPG bona fides, making it one of the best survival games in years. There aren't many games that I've been anxious to dive back into after playing for over 100 hours, but I'm still daydreaming about my next tiny expedition. Even the obnoxiously small inventory space and continued wonkiness and stability issues haven't come close to throwing a wet blanket over an otherwise fantastic experience. It's a testament then to how incredibly strong every other part of Grounded is that these issues did very little to cramp my style or my immense enjoyment.
A triumphant combination of enthralling combat, top-tier creature and character design, and a captivating open world. Horizon Forbidden West is an absolute blast and fantastic showcase for the power of the PS5. Although the return of a couple of familiar series trappings and a noticeable lack of freeform climbing never threatens to derail the enjoyment, it does leave it falling frustratingly short of something revolutionary. Major evolutionary steps have firmly been placed in the right direction, however, and there's no doubt in the many of hours of fun to have with Aloy, who stakes her claim further to be one of this generation of gaming's greatest characters. Guerrilla has outdone itself yet again with Forbidden West, and at this trajectory, neither the horizon nor the sky's the limit for what could come next.
Live Alive is a fascinating piece of JRPG history that's more than worthy of the energy Square Enix has spent to remake it for a global audience with a beautiful new art style decades later. Its unusual vignette structure and lovable ensemble cast are a delight to spend time with, especially thanks to the addition of voice acting.
Naming was never my forte.
And the ultimate story payoff remains surprising and stand out among JRPGs even decades after its original iteration. It's 7 different characters, each make inventive and surprising use of the deceptively simple combat system, which adds flavor to the most challenging optional boss fights. The remake could have put a bit more work into mitigating some of the original's more tedious grinds toward the end, but by the time that grind kicks in, Live Alive had enough hooks stuck in me that I couldn't put it down until I jammed out to Megalomania for the final time.
Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope takes the excellent tactical combat ideas of Kingdom Battle and runs absolutely wild with them. Its goofy characters still have the ability to bounce off of each other, but they're now free from the rigid grid and are wonderfully customizable thanks to the mix and match sparks that give them new and reliably interesting powers. Between fights, you get to catch your breath in the large and brilliantly colorful open worlds, solving its many light puzzles and being puzzled by its oddball story. It's extremely gratifying to play an ambitious sequel that fixes all the main issues I had with the original, and then some.
Redlandia may seem like an offbeat location for a skating game, but in reality it's a wonderfully eclectic reflection of what Ollie Ollie World itself is trying to be. In this vibrant place, skating is an obsession and an escape, whether you're wall riding through a forest or grinding across an incredibly industrial factoryscape. Its gameplay has enough depth to challenge hardcore players to master its level-long combos, but it's also a smooth and exciting ride for novices, backed by characters that are quirky and passionate. These elements ring true in every facet of its design, from the more forgiving approach to basic gameplay, through to the new mechanics and refinements that make the skill ceiling higher than ever. Ollie Ollie World is a fantastic evolution of what was already an outstanding skating series.
As an engrossing 15 to 20 hour adventure game, a chronicle of a small town and its people in turbulent times, a reverent celebration of the finer details of late medieval history, and a clever detective story in which straight answers are hard to come by, Pentiment is a clear champion. My gripes about it are all relatively minor, and I look forward to playing it at least once or twice more to explore roads not taken. It never suffers for its simplicity, lacking in combat or traditional puzzles, because of how effectively it tangled me up in all the complexities of its gorgeously realized world and made me want to learn all I could about its people and its past. There isn't much more to say about Pentiment other than that I can hardly recommend it highly enough.
After decades of believing that we'd never see Gilbert get to make his Monkey Island 3, I was in no way disappointed with Return's conclusion. In fact, it moved me and made clear that Gilbert cares as much about these characters as we fans do. I expected Return to Monkey Island to be funny. I expected it to have good and often zany puzzles and hilarious puzzle solutions. You can see that in its writing, its acquired taste art style, and its delightfully upbeat music. But I didn't expect it to have such heart. Monkey Island has been known almost solely for its comedic prowess over the past 3 decades, but Return reminded me of why I first fell in love with Guybrush Threepwood in a way that will have me thinking about it for a long time. What longtime fans get out of it is definitely going to be markedly different from what newcomers take away from it, but I can say that Return to Monkey Island meant a lot to me before I ever clicked to start a new game, and it meant far more after the end credits rolled.
Citizens of Bermuda, your new queen, Guybrush Threepwood.
Rogue Legacy 2 is a transformative sequel that essentially rebuilds the extraordinarily influential 2013 original into a modern roguelite that stands nearly shoulder to shoulder with the best of the genre. Its wealth of upgrade choices to be made in between runs can be a bit overwhelming the first time through, especially without a way to undo mistakes, but that issue feels small compared to an incredible menu of customization options, excellent combat that handsomely rewards skillful play, 6 diverse areas that each provide their own unique challenge, and a deep post-game mode that provides plenty of reason to come back for new challenges long after the first rolling of the credits. With Rogue Legacy 2, Cellar Door Games can now not only have a claim to developing one of the first ever roguelites, but also one of the best. If it can get its technical issues under control quickly, and progress is already being made on that front, Rumbleverse's fantastic wrestling-flavored gameplay has everything going for it to become the next big thing in the Battle Royale genre. Once I was in a match, slamming bodies, slapping chests, and RKOing dudes from out of nowhere, it quickly became some of the most fun I've had playing video games in 2022. And it's more than just spectacle. There are some extremely deep and well thought out mechanics ingrained in its combat design, opening up plenty of possibilities to outplay and outthink your opponent, just like in a smartly designed fighting game. I'm hoping it fleshes out the shop with more worthwhile and over-the-top items, but if Rumbleverse is this good right out of the gate, I can't wait to see where it goes over the next few years. Sifu demands a lot from you, and that's a sword that cuts both ways. Its combat is impeccable with incredibly smooth and impactful animation, deep fighting mechanics, and challenging enemies that really make you fight tooth and nail for every victory. At the same time, the repetition that comes from replaying the level so you can essentially set a high score and give yourself a chance at completing the rest of the short campaign with what's effectively one persistent pool of lives can lead to some really frustrating moments with no clear path through outside of just trying and trying until you get better at it. On the other side of that vicious learning curve though, is one of the most impressive beat-em-ups I've ever played, with excellent level design, fantastic music, and, once it was all over, a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction that few other video games can provide.
Building from the solid foundations of its predecessors, the deluge of impressive quality of life changes and exciting improvements Splatoon 3 brings makes it hard to imagine the ink-based shooter series as it was before this. More than just a simple upgrade, its array of new features make it just as enticing for competitive players as it is approachable for newcomers. And while there aren't any huge additions that shake things up the way Salmon Run did for Splatoon 2, Splatoon 3's new maps, weapons, and PvE bosses have still managed to make its already excellent multiplayer clashes even better.
A gorgeous and well-honed remake of one of the biggest boppers in the PlayStation pantheon, The Last of Us Part 1 is the best way to play, or replay, Naughty Dog's esteemed survival classic. The striking improvements it makes to its completely rebuilt world are complemented by the subtle refinements of its characters' performances. And while it isn't retrofitted with every one of the sequel's best changes, the upgrades to movement and AI make a welcome difference in an already outstanding game. It's harder to argue it was an entirely crucial remake though, considering 2014's The Last of Us Remastered still stands head and shoulders above nearly all of its story-driven action-adventure peers to this day.
The Stanley Parable's base game truly holds up almost a decade later, both in its hilarious narrated writing and the clever satire that houses it. Ultra Deluxe may seem like little more than a decent lighting improvement and a simple console port at first glance, but the new content that's been added alongside those things is on the scale of a whole new game. Those new encounters are consistently impressive and always entertaining, even if the feeling that we've seen some of these tricks before means they never quite reach the heights of my first surprising playthrough back in 2013. But if you've never played the Stanley Parable at all, Ultra Deluxe is a definitive version that provides another extremely convincing reason to do so.
Total War Warhammer 3's single-player mode presents us with a tense, challenging, multi-layered campaign driven along by a compelling story and a memorable cast of rivals. The Chaos Realms cleverly draw these larger-than-life figures together, so even those in the remote corners of the world will be able to test each other's mettle. And while the size of the faction list currently feels a bit disappointing coming from Mortal Empires, all of the newly introduced factions are inventive and just plain fun on the campaign and battle maps. The true test of Warhammer 3 is still to come, when we'll get to play with all the factions from all three games on the massive combined map. But even if that's the main reason you're interested in it, there's plenty of excitement to be had already.
I completed the original Legend of Zelda when I was 9 years old, but 9-year-old me wouldn't have lasted long in Tunic. Though it may look adorably approachable thanks to its deceptively cute, furry orange protagonist, Tunic quickly makes it clear that you'd best be ready for a fight. It is a fantastic Zelda-style game for the Elden Ring generation, and solving its ceaselessly clever campaign and challenging combat through careful studying of your indecipherable but intuitive in-game instruction booklet and agile controller work gave me a well-earned payoff and feeling of satisfaction that I won't soon forget.
And there you have it. Those were IGN's best reviewed games of 2022. To see these reviews in full, make sure to head over to IGN's website or YouTube channel. And of course, for everything else video games, stick with IGN.